Be veg, go green to save the planet.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Space is nothing else than the form of all phenomena of the external sense, that is, the subjective condition of the sensibility under which alone external intuition is possible. Please continue watching to find out more.
Ahoy! That means hello in Slovak. I am Samuel. The gentle people of Slovakia admire your noble deeds in your daily life. May you be cherished and protected in the love of the Almighty. Immanuel Kant was one of the most influential German philosophers in modern Western philosophy. His most famous work was in the area of ethics and metaphysics. Kant was born in 1724 into a household that emphasized religious devotion and a literal interpretation of the Bible. From an early age, Kant showed a great aptitude for learning. Although his family wanted him to focus on Latin and religious studies, Kant turned to what he considered the more rational disciplines of philosophy and science. He enrolled at the University of Königsberg in East Prussia, where he studied and eventually taught for his entire career. Kant's work in the area of morality was considered completely new at the time. He stated, first of all, that all humans are worthy of dignity and respect. His philosophy also said that motivation, not outcome, is the most important determinant of goodness. Thus, if one's actions are motivated by good, that person's morality is good, even if the situation does not turn out as expected. To Kant, moral actions and duty are nearly identical. Thus, a person has moral worth if they fulfill a duty, regardless of perceived personal gain. In his doctrine of transcendental idealism, Kant argued that space and time are mere forms of intuition, which structure all experience, and therefore, that while things in themselves exist and contribute to experience, they are nonetheless distinct from the objects of experience. From this it follows that the objects of experience are mere appearances, and that the nature of things as they are in themselves is consequently unknowable to us. We are now going to present a selection from one of the greatest works in the history of philosophy, Critique of Pure Reason. Transcendental Doctrine of Elements. First part, Transcendental Aesthetic. Section 1 of Space. Conclusions from the foregoing conceptions. Space does not represent any property of objects as things in themselves, nor does it represent them in their relations to each other. In other words, space does not represent to us any determination of objects such as attaches to the objects themselves, and would remain even though all subjective conditions of the intuition were abstracted. For neither absolute nor relative determinations of objects can be intuited prior to the existence of the things to which they belong, and therefore not a priori, in principle. Space is nothing else than the form of all phenomena of the external sense, that is, the subjective condition of the sensibility, under which alone external intuition is possible. Now, because the receptivity or capacity of the subject to be affected by objects necessarily antecedes all intuitions of these objects, it is easily understood how the form of all phenomena can be given in the mind previous to all actual perceptions, therefore a priori, and how it, as a pure intuition in which all objects must be determined, can contain principles of the relations of these objects prior to all experience. It is therefore from the human point of view only that we can speak of space, extended objects, etc. If we depart from this subjective condition, under which alone we can obtain external intuition, or, in other words, by means of which we are affected by objects, the representation of space has no meaning whatsoever. this predicate is only applicable to things insofar as they appear to us, that is, are objects of sensibility. The constant form of this receptivity, which we call sensibility, is a necessary condition of all relations in which objects can be intuited as existing without us, and when abstraction of these objects is made, is a pure intuition, to which we give the name of space. It is clear that we cannot make these special conditions of sensibility into conditions of the possibility of things, but only of the possibility of their existence as far as they are phenomena. And so we may correctly say that space contains all which can appear to us externally, but not all things considered as things in themselves, be they intuited or not, or by whatsoever subject one will. As to the intuitions of other thinking beings, we cannot judge whether they are or are not bound by the same conditions which limit our own intuition, and which for us are universally valid. If we join the limitation of a judgment to the conception of the subject, then the judgment will possess unconditioned validity. For example, the proposition, all objects are beside each other in space, is valid only under the limitation that these things are taken as objects of our sensuous intuition. But if I join the condition to the conception and say all things as external phenomena are beside each other in space, then the rule is valid universally and without any limitation. Our expositions consequently teach the reality, i.e., the objective validity of space in regard of all which can be presented to us externally as object, and at the same time also the ideality of space in regard to objects when they are considered by means of reason as things in themselves, that is, without reference to the constitution of our sensibility. We maintain therefore the empirical reality of space in regard to all possible external experience, although we must admit its transcendental ideality. In other words, that it is nothing, so soon as we withdraw the condition upon which the possibility of all experience depends, and look upon space as something that belongs to things in themselves. But with the exception of space, there is no representation, subjective and referring to something external to us, which could be called objective a priori. For there are no other subjective representations from which we can deduce synthetical propositions a priori, as we can from the intuition of space. Therefore, to speak accurately, no ideality whatever belongs to these, although they agree in this respect with the representation of space, that they belong merely to the subjective nature of the mode of sensuous perception. Such a mode, for example, as that of sight, of hearing, and of feeling, by means of the sensations of colour, sound and heat, but which, because they are only sensations and not intuitions, do not of themselves give us the cognition of any object, least of all an a priori cognition. My purpose in the above remark is merely this, to guard anyone against illustrating the asserted ideality of space by examples quite insufficient, for example, by colour, taste, etc. For these must be contemplated not as properties of things, but only as changes in the subject, changes which may be different in different men. For, in such a case, that which is originally a mere phenomenon, a rose, for example, is taken by the empirical understanding for a thing in itself, though to every different eye, in respect of its colour, it may appear different. On the contrary, the transcendental conception of phenomena in space is a critical admonition that, in general, nothing which is intuited in space is a thing in itself, and that space is not a form which belongs as a property to things, but that objects are quite unknown to us in themselves, and what we call outward objects are nothing else but mere representations of our sensibility, whose form is space, but whose real correlate, the thing in itself, is not known by means of these representations, nor ever can be, but respecting which, in experience, no inquiry is ever made. Delightful viewers, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today on Words of Wisdom. May the mercy of the Most High be always with you in your sincere seeking of inner wisdom and truth.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule y suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule y suprememastertv.com/WOW.
I nostri programmi sono offerti in molte lingue. Consultate suprememastertv.com/schedule e suprememastertv.com/WOW.
Vegan equals love in action.